Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Very excited to be with you. As always, my name is Cameron English, joined by Dr. Liza Dunn,
Hello.
toxicologist, physician, all around smart, lovely lady. Liza, what's going on?
Not much. Not much. Been busy. We just had our space and it went well. It was kind of interesting. It was all about cow burps. But yeah.
That's right. The range of topics we cover on our Twitter spaces, opioids to cow farts. It's quite a spectrum. Of course, well, you might not if you don't see this clip. We have a special guest with us. Normally we go through 3 stories and try to break down the science and give people a better understanding. But we have a gentleman joining us today named Scott Hamilton Kennedy, who is a great filmmaker. I was going to put together a little bio for you, but your resume is expansive.
It is.
Academy Award nominee, documentary filmmaker. You've worked on music videos and commercials and all kinds of cool projects over the years. But in particular, you made one documentary that we want to talk about called Shot in the Arm. But before we get there, just give people an introduction. Who are you? What do you do? And then maybe why you decided to start making science documentaries of all the things you could do.
Thank you. Great to see you both again, and I'm honored to be on here, and I hope I make sense to your very smart audience. So I like to describe myself as a filmmaker, journalist, storyteller. Very important. Storyteller is a big part of that. And I came to defending science on my previous film, Food Evolution, when I was approached by an organization called IFT, the Institute of Food Technologists. They're food scientists, very sexy stuff. Sorry for the sarcasm. And they wanted to make a movie about food and science and the fact that we're moving towards 9 billion people by 2050. How are we going to feed ourselves sustainably? And they reached out to a few filmmakers, and my cynical ex-liberal self, did you hear that X, Liza? Sorry, just kidding. And ex-bleeding heart liberal, let's say that. I guess I'm still a Democrat. I was so cynical that I thought, oh, well, these guys are corporate guys. They want to make a corporate film. They want to make an industrial. And I was so wrong. I said, I have to have Final Cut. I said, of course you have to have Final Cut. We're scientists, right? You can't manipulate it. And I went away and researched some big topics for this. Food waste was waving its hands for a little while, and it's still a very important topic. And please don't waste food. It's awful. I'll do the quick version of it. And Liza, you might have these stats better than me. But in developing countries, there is 20-30% of the food is wasted getting to your home. And then none of it's wasted once it gets to your home. And it's almost reversed here. We waste it once it's in our home, once it's in our restaurants, and which is just horrifying. It's like we're so spoiled by how much food we have access to that we can waste it. So please don't waste your food. Leftovers are amazing. And then I brought up the GMO controversy, and that really was waving its hand, saying this is not being told correctly, and had just great tension in it. And that started the journey. I won't do a whole jag on Food Evolution, but it started this journey that ended up with Neil deGrasse Tyson narrating that film. And we became friends, and now he's an executive producer on Shot in the Arm. But to your question about science and filmmaking, I didn't know science needed to be defended. I was just stumbling along like most of us, just taking this all for granted, right? As my daughter's 7th grade science teacher said to her class, tell me something in your life that doesn't involve science. Right? And it's just nonstop from the moment we wake up while we're sleeping, this bed we're sleeping in. And I was just going along saying, hope all those experts out there are keeping me safe, which they were, by large percentages. And then I started to see this enormous, cynical anti-science movement that has just gotten bigger and sadly more powerful. Then that led to Shot in the Arm, which is my current film that we're going to talk about today.
So give us a little bit of a breakdown of the film. My understanding is it sort of evolved. It started with you looking at these outbreaks of measles that were occurring and trying to understand the anti-vaccine movement more broadly. And I believe that was early 2020. And then COVID-19 hits.
No. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So No, it's okay. So the pandemic hits, and of course your project has to be reframed to a certain extent because you can't talk about vaccines and infectious disease and not talk about this. So take us from there and explain what happened.
Yeah, it started in 2019 when I saw record-breaking measles outbreaks in the United States, a state of emergency in New York City, connected to the Orthodox Jewish community there, and a state of emergency in Washington State. It was only a few years after the measles outbreak at Disneyland, record-breaking measles outbreaks across Europe. And my lazy Google search showed me that in 2000, we were on the road to eliminating measles in the United States because of the success of the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And so I'm like, what? We were going towards not even needing the vaccine anymore because of eliminating it. To a state of emergency in New York City, the mayor coming on to say we're in a state of emergency, please get your children vaccinated. And we started the process. My first step in that process was reaching out to Dr. Paul Offit at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a wonderful scientist and communicator, very brave and funny. And he said, Scott, it's not complicated. There are people out there that have come to be known as anti-vaxxers that scare families into not vaccinating their children. And it's never a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to see measles outbreaks in those communities. And I thought, well, that's a story. Let's go dig in on this. And I started shooting in 2019 at the CDC's ACIP meetings where they review and approve the latest vaccines. And Del Bigtree, one of the top anti-vaxxers, was there that day. So I got to film with him as well. And then I went on to film with Peter Hotez and Tony Fauci before he became super Tony Fauci during COVID. And also the two other sort of top of the pyramid anti-vaxxers, Andrew Wakefield and Robert Kennedy Jr. So we thought we had a pretty sturdy movie and all of that, right? It's deep. It crosses decades. And then COVID happened, as you said. And for a minute, I was with a few people that thought, well, maybe, just maybe, a once-in-a-century pandemic would be a wake-up call for these anti-science people to go, oh, let's all come together and follow the science. And boy, was I wrong. They only got more ruthless. There was a perfect storm of who was in office at the time and all sorts of things. But a lot of that was that cynicism and misinformation and disinformation had been building for years. And it then became just a terrible perfect storm during COVID that goes all the way to the fragility of our social contract, which is a very important part. As much as it's a science film, the social contract's probably my favorite part of Shot in the Arm because it's another incredibly important institution, another institution like science that's not political, right? It's just these inherent, like written and unwritten rules that we follow to have a functioning society, to be a decent person in society, to look past the end of your nose and what comes out of your thumbs and mouth to say, oh, I'm surrounded by other human beings. Excuse my sarcasm. And how do I deal with myself as an individual? How do I deal with myself as a community in my city, state, country, planet? So that was a long answer. Are we wrapped? Just kidding.
All set. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for joining us. In all seriousness, to dive into the film a little more specifically, I'm really curious how, especially early in the pandemic, how did the events surrounding the beginning of the response to it, how did that influence the anti-vaccine movement? Because like most people are looking at this from the outside, but you're watching this as it's occurring, and RFK, Wakefield, and some other new additions to the all-star lineup, they glommed onto this very quickly, even before there was a vaccine, and they had all these ideas about where it came from and how dangerous it is, and whether it's even real or not. Like there was like these narratives sprouted up quickly. So I'm curious what you saw. Like how did the initial events in the pandemic influence the anti-vaccine movement from what you saw?
They seem to be excited in a way that there was this trauma that they could take advantage of. That's personal. That's not as much as evidence-based, but they were confusing because, as you just said, they would say COVID isn't real, but vitamin C can cure it. So I'm like, well, wait, which one? Which one is it? It's real and vitamin C can cure it. I can follow you on that. But you're saying it isn't real. If I don't know what you're saying, which is when you look at the history of people that are anti-science, really the history of liars, right? That it's their bread and butter to actually not be consistent. Shouldn't be, but they're all over the map. So they took advantage of a fragile situation to just become more and more cynical, right? Fomenting blame before there was even blame there. Robert Kennedy Jr. saying early on, as the vaccine was just being developed, the vaccine is going to kill far more people. Dead wrong. 20 million lives saved in the first couple of years, minuscule amounts of harm from the vaccine. And yeah, they just felt more empowered and grew small, but noisy and powerful. And then, yeah, they got more ruthless and more powerful.
Les, I'm curious to get your take too. Were you seeing that early on? Because I actually didn't know you at that point. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I did. So I started doing podcasts with Cameron. What now? It's about a year and a half now, probably.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of through COVID by that time when we got started. So, I saw a lot of consternation from both sides about the vaccine. So it's interesting. I think that there was mixed messaging from bipartisan mixed messaging. So at the very beginning, when there was the whole idea about Operation Warp Speed, I saw a lot of people, and there's footage of lots of politicians and things like that on the left saying, this has happened way too fast. We don't trust the vaccine. We're not gonna do this. And I think that what they didn't realize is that they were setting themselves up for a complete fiasco in the long run, because they laid out all these talking points that anti-vaxxers then were able to use as reasoning for not going to get the vaccine when the administration changed. And so I think that once again, it is a clear example of how things should stay apolitical. Regardless of whether you or not you like Trump, regardless of whether or not you like Biden, I think the mistake that people made was that they and this is a bipartisan mistake, was that they went after the vaccine to achieve their political purposes. They didn't want to hand Trump a win, and then they didn't want to hand Biden a win on the other side, right? So the whole thing about Operation Warp Speed got undermined from the beginning. And I think it's such a shame, because this is such incredible technology that's got potential to improve the lives of millions of people with other medical problems. I mean, technically, theoretically, well, actually, no, they're doing it. They're working on research like this now. You can take this technology and tweak it so you can treat people's cancers individually, potentially without any chemotherapy. That's the incredible science behind this research. And because it got layered in and it then politicized, and it's a little bit tragic.
Scott, you cover a related issue in the film that I'm hoping maybe you can develop. You mentioned pretty early on that when Andrew Wakefield published his now garbage paper, which has been widely repudiated by everybody in science, linking the MMR vaccine to autism. It might be Paul Offit, I'm not sure which expert, but someone points out in your film that the media ran with that story.
Yeah.
And they sort of promoted it as this meaningful debate within science. And so you would get Wakefield or one of his compatriots against someone like Paul Offit or another credible expert. And the way that it was framed for the public was, this is a meaningful debate that's happening in science. And in reality, that's not what happened. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about that. And then do you think that complicated the pandemic response based on what Liza was saying, where you would have someone who's on the fringe say something, and then you would get a major outlet like ABC would start talking about breakthrough COVID infections. And this is early on after the vaccines are rolled out. And I'm just looking at that. I'm going, what are you guys doing? On the one hand, you're telling everyone they have to get this, but then in the next news story on your website, you're saying that there's breakthrough infections. So, speaking of cynical, that makes me question, but the sincerity of some people in the media. So tackle that however you'd like. I'm very curious.
Wow, that's enormous. And very, very, very important and interesting. I'm going to take it back a step to draft off of what Liza just said, that all those frustrations that you point out, Liza, are spot on. And I'm purporting, I think I am, that moment one of some of those mistakes was, from expert to journalist to individual, was, what am I hearing? What are we discussing? What tools do I have available to me to determine the motives of the human being talking, the evidence to support what they're saying, and God forbid the patience to see where this goes and adjust accordingly? That's a huge part of the problems that lead to where we are today. And that's, we can talk about education, but I talk a lot about just humility, right? Having humility to, it's a quote Ice Cube today, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And it's beautiful. It's clean. It's very, very clean, right? Can you have the humility to check yourself and go, oh, just because my tribe is doing this, or I feel this way about something, sounds like it's rushed, right? Operation Warp Speed, not the greatest name to make people feel like it's not going to be rushed, but we'll leave that to the side. Fine. That's skeptical. Sadly, we're living through a time where cynicism is rampant, right? Skeptical is Operation Warp Speed makes me feel concerned that this could be rushed. Cynicism is shown the evidence of the incredible amount of testing that had gone on, the amount of testing that had already been going on 10 years-ish prior to COVID, that helped accelerate the way that these vaccines could be developed. And then you still say you don't trust it. That's cynical. That's not skeptical. So now, Cameron, bring you back to your question. It was definitely Dr. Paul Offit who said that the media ran with it. And the biggest tragedy, I can do it, from Dr. Wakefield's, he's not a doctor. Thankfully, he had his license taken away. Wakefield's study was fraudulent on so many levels that it's shocking that it was published in The Lancet. Liza has more information on the imperfections of The Lancet than I do. And I actually would love to hear you say, does that mean that The Lancet should be thrown out, baby, with the bathwater? Or should it be pointed out where they've made mistakes and allow them to try and communicate? I'll let you come back to that as you like. The pain came that they published it and it took 9 years to retract it, right? And in those 9 years, the media... 12 years to retract it. Thank you. It's in my movie. I should remember this. And 12 years to retract it. And in that time, it traveled the world like heckfire and created skepticism and fear and cynicism that we still see today. And that was, I can't believe it took that long. I don't know why it took that long. It should have taken about 2 weeks. The scientific community immediately looked at the study and said, A, it's not really a study. He's just saying, hey, maybe it could, we should look into it. It was terrible. Like how they've said that if you read the study, that it's even saying that. But the press conference said that. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way they're doing lots of science these days. And it's really frustrating to look at some of these claims that get traction in the media and that turn out to be completely untrue. The most recent one was when the American Academy of Pediatrics published an article in their journal, Pediatrics, claiming that GMOs have all sorts of health problems associated with them, and that glyphosate is associated with that as well. And they made all sorts of allegations that turned out not to be true, and they haven't retracted it. And so it's frustrating when you actually have, the National Academy of Sciences and all sorts of other organizations that recognize the safety and the importance of GMOs. And you've still got this mainstream now explosive article in a top-tier medical journal that is false and has not been retracted. And the Lancet's done the same thing with multiple articles, not just Wakefield article. Now, I want to say that there are a lot of very good researchers who publish articles in the Lancet. It is the top-tier medical journal in the world, that and the New England Journal of Medicine. So I hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater with good scientific publications, but the Lancet's record when it comes to publishing in articles on agriculture is really, really unfortunate. And I think that those things should be addressed. And if scientists really want to claim back the trust that they've lost during this epidemic, I think it's important to start engaging that way and retracting articles that are fraudulent, quite frankly.
It's shocking that it would take that they haven't even retracted that terrible. I remember that when that study came out and you sent it to me, Paul Offit sent it to me, and it's just like, what is going on? That this could sneak through, and that might be a different podcast for us to really dive into all the layers of why that bullshit would. Did I curse on this show? Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I'll try. Can would have gotten all the way to being published, but it's I don't know. I'm going to jump around on this for a second here because I know we're going to get to Robert Kennedy Jr. and looking at Robert Kennedy Jr. as a possibility of heading the HHS, which I have plenty of evidence to say should not happen. He's not an honest broker. He's not a person who respects or uses or puts himself through the ringer of the scientific method and the checks and balances of democracy, right? So on top of that, now we're seeing people that I don't know if they want to try and make the best of it, but they'll say things like, well, he's got some good ideas on X. He's got some good ideas on Y. First of all, we've got to look very carefully about what you're saying on that. Second of all, some of those ideas are worthy of putting on the table. Obesity, toxicology, important. But you have to start with the fact that he's not an honest broker. So I can't trust that we're going to have a healthy conversation, a solution-oriented conversation with somebody who doesn't play by those rules. Am I making sense?
One thing I thought you did really well in the film that kind of builds on what you're saying, I think, is you illustrate that people like Kennedy and Del Bigtree and these other folks, they're really good at pushing the right buttons with people, and they're really good to catering to their values. And I think you point out in the film that when they go to Texas, right, they talk about the Constitution and individual liberty. And then when they go up to Washington, they'll talk about the environment, or they'll draw parallels with people that are more progressive. And that's all to package their message in a way that people are going to find appealing. So I want you to talk about that, which is interesting in itself. But I think, to your credit, you tried to do the same thing in the film. You tried to let people speak for themselves. You tried to give them a chance to explain what they were concerned about, talking about these parents with autistic children. I thought you did a good job of empathizing with them or sympathizing with them. And I think that makes the movie a little bit more compelling, or much more compelling, I should say, than a lot of the science media that's out there that just totally disregards the fact that you should try to level with your audience.
Thank you.
So talk about that.
Thank you. That was a big part of our journey with the film is, we didn't necessarily have it posted on our computers as we were editing it, said empathy, but empathy was a huge part of how we tried to approach the film. So empathy is a beautiful part of storytelling. It's a beautiful part of trying to be a decent human being on the planet. It's one of the gifts that we can do as decent human beings, but it was to distinguish between having empathy for a parent who could start off skeptical about, why is my child autistic? What happened in the world that made my child autistic? Did I have anything to do with it? Was there chemicals in my environment? Was it a mistake from the vaccine? Fine. Skeptical about that. Look at that. But the distinguishing between that and a person who foments doubt in that poor, frustrated parent and says it was the vaccine, it was big government, it was big pharma, it was this and this, and fomenting that cynicism. We really worked hard to try and distinguish those things. I have plenty of empathy for any parent dealing with a difficult situation with their children. My nephew happens to be autistic, but my big sister didn't bite on any of that disinformation, thankfully. I think she would actually probably cause Jenny McCarthy harm if she saw her face to face because of how much she is damaged. And just to follow that through, that my big sister, Lisa Marie Kennedy, I love you, worked so hard with Nikki, my nephew, to try to make, and with her ex-husband and with his big brother and experts, to try and make Nikki's life as good as possible. And there were doctors at the time that said, you have to come to peace with this, Lisa. He'll never have a driver's license. He'll never go to college. He has a driver's license. I'm going to get choked up. He's about to graduate college. So that's what can happen when you just dig in on the hard work of trying to use the best tools available. What's happened in this, one of the worst parts of the misinformation around vaccines cause autism, which they don't, is that it turns into a cynical blame game. Somebody did this to your child. You need to go get them. You didn't have anything to do with it. Which we can dig in on. But why, instead of seeing it as, this is the child that I have, what are the best things that I can do to make that child's life as fulfilling as possible? So I think I may have gotten away a little bit from your answer, Cameron. So bring me back if you want.
No, that's great. And it brings me to a follow-up, because you did what a lot of people either can't do or they won't do, which is you actually sat down with the people who you think are causing the harm. So you sat down in a room with RFK Jr. And I think some of the other folks, and normally I wouldn't ask about the motives of people because you can't be in someone's head, but you've been in a room with him face to face. What's your perception of the leaders of this movement? Are they, you've used the word cynical a few times, are they truly just out to sell supplements and sell subscriptions and sell books? Or do they really believe this and they're just hopelessly wrong? I mean, can you make any sense of that?
Yeah.
From talking to them?
It's as complicated as you're asking. I can't get inside of Robert Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree, or Andrew Wakefield's head. I can say that there doesn't seem to be much evidence that they really ever approached it from a open-minded, solution-oriented angle. They approached it from, I've got something that goes counter to the narrative and I'm going to be the one to break it, right? They've manipulated the David versus Goliath story. They purport themselves to be, Woodward and Bernstein in Watergate, except Woodward and Bernstein were really good, hardworking journalists that followed evidence. And somebody wants to write to me and say they can poke holes in Woodward and Bernstein. Go ahead, but by the percentages, they did this hard work. So but it is that history that has allowed people, especially on the internet, to purport to be a Woodward and Bernstein. I've got the story that the people don't want you to hear. So there's that motivates them. There's definitely money that motivates them. Money and ego is huge, right? Is in growing their relevance, and growing their pocketbooks through speaking fees and selling supplements and getting more members on board and lawsuits and on and on. And so, but to specifically to Robert Kennedy Jr., we filmed with all of them. I was in the room with Del Bigtree at the CDC and interviewed him. And I had a long sit-down interview with Robert Kennedy Jr., and I am grateful that he gave me the interview. And I was not impressed with him as a human being. I find him to be clever, smart in his own ways, but the opposite of humble. And he says he's available to changing his mind and admitting he's wrong, but I've never seen any evidence of it. He's also a bully. He threatened me a little bit at the end of the interview, not on camera. saying that, send me the interview and maybe I'll sign your release, which he didn't know that I knew what the heck I was doing. And him sitting with me for an hour is legally binding release. But I didn't say that. I said, well, why? He goes, well, because you're a liar and a scam artist. And I stayed calm. Thankfully, my Irish temper didn't come up. And I said, I'm sorry, sir. Show me the lie. And he goes, oh, don't play games. You see this? He's a bully, right? He calls me a liar and he doesn't even have one false example to point to. So forgive me he does make me very frustrated that he's gone this far, that he has the potential to be the most powerful person in the United States in terms of control of our health, food, agriculture. It's terrifying. Maybe not agriculture as much, but it's really, really scary. So that just frustrates me. Then through the interview, I got him, as you were kind enough to point out, Cameron, that we tried to let them reveal themselves. As much as I'm going on about my personal frustrations with Robert Kennedy Jr., in the filmmaking process, we try to allow their words, their actions to show who they are. And he does that over and over again, especially through a very powerful story in Samoa.
Yeah, I'm not going to reveal that because I want people to watch the film and actually see what you're talking about. But it's funny you say that because as I was watching it, I'm listening to him speak and I went, there's something off, right? There's something about what I'm hearing that's triggering an alarm. Like you know what I mean? So maybe I'm biased, but I thought that was well.
No,
well,
that's what everybody who's seen that scene has the same feeling. They can see him squirming.
Okay.
You can see him like wondering, did I go too far in that?
I thought I was talking to one of the Kennedys.
Okay. Well, pivoting from, the approach of those folks, you talked to Paul Offit a lot in the film, and towards the end, and this has been well reported, but early on in the pandemic, he made some comments to the effect of, COVID is not going to be much bigger than the seasonal flu.
Yep.
And to his credit, and I'm a big fan. I've interviewed him multiple times. I own his books. I've learned a lot. He came forward and he's like, boy, did I whiff on that one. I swung and missed. That was just awful. But the message in the film, and that I've heard him say, is that that's how I build trust with people. That's why my patients trust me. That's why people read my books, is because I'm willing to say, I was wrong, and I'm learning from what I got wrong. And I think, to go back to something Liza said, on both sides, and what you said about humility, that was utterly lacking, right? Someone would make a prediction and it would fall flat, and then they go, hey, win some, lose some. I'm still your boss. I'm still in charge. On the other side, it was, they built this. It's a laboratory weapon, and they're trying to kill your children. Oh, well, whatever. I'm on to the next thing, right? So this was going on throughout the pandemic. And I think what you illustrate, what I want to hear you talk about, is get something wrong and then say, I got it wrong. I'm human. I'm a scientist. Getting wrong is, in fact, part of the process. And that's how we move forward, I think, in terms of science communication. So talk about that.
Yeah, it's sad that one of the greatest things we can do, let alone in science, but as human beings, is to admit that you cut somebody off in traffic, and the difference between, them honking at you and you flipping them off versus them honking at you and you going, my bad. I did do that. And why that has become so hard in our society is a different conversation. But admitting fault is an incredibly important thing. And as Paul says in the movie, it doesn't mean that you can't trust them on anything. Liza did it 2 minutes ago about the Lancet, and I have such respect for Offit. He's about as close to being the opposite of Robert Kennedy Jr. He is open. He is honest. He is smart. He is learned. He has the evidence to support all those things, but he's also funny and humble. And he's just available to what you just said, Cameron, that mistakes are a natural part of science. And sometimes it's not even a mistake. It's just you tried a hypothesis and it didn't work out. That's not a mistake. That's the process. So I wish our schools and our communities talked about that being a natural part of our culture, right? The scientific method and humility and admitting fault. Wouldn't that be nice? And there's some people that do it, but it's not a natural part of our day-to-day lives. Mostly it's, I'm telling you the right stuff and all those other people are wrong. And it's like, God, that's drastically boring in terms of what the human condition is. But yeah, I wish we could celebrate nuance, evidence, humility. Mistakes are going to be made. Let's try and take the best evidence and solve that problem instead of blaming somebody and making the problem worse.
Well said. As we wrap up here, let me just encourage people to go see the film. And what I enjoyed so much about it, on top of all the information, which is good, is that you're very, very good at humanizing everyone. I mean, there's scenes where I can see your own family is struggling with the lockdown. Your daughters are away from school and they're going, like, you can see that they're fighting to not lose their sanity. And that's endearing, right? Because we've all been there. And then my wife is also a high school teacher. And so watching your wife try to figure out how to teach a bunch of teenagers on Zoom with essentially no notice, because everyone's doing this by the seat of their pants. It's like, it's unbelievable. So not only is it educational, but you captured what people were experiencing.
Oh, thank you.
And so for that alone, I think it's worth seeing. So well done. 5 stars from me.
I appreciate you. We worked hard to try and let my family be just a little bit of the all of us, as you're pointing out, and not a humble brag. So I begged my editing team, part of the editing team, but begged my editing team, do not be precious with me and my family. That's why we have to have some of my favorite stuff is my daughter slamming the door in my face, and my wife, they're trying to take a nap, and she's like, "Why would you be asking me a question?" Just those, and my daughter putting whipped cream in her mouth from the refrigerator, and just all those things we lived through. And I've been so happy that most people have, by large percentages, have really related to that, and I'm just great. I'm honored that my family can represent that, because I was scared. I was very scared that people would be like, "Why is your family in the movie? You spoiled liberal, blah, blah, blah." So, thank you. Do you want me to send it?
I thought it was great. It was an amusing part of the film. Like, as a married man, to see your wife go, "Would you just leave me alone?" I'm sure. That's it. Whatever you want to say is totally fine.
Can I tell folks where they can see the movie?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Give us your social media. Tell us where we can watch the movie, please.
Great. So shotinthearmmovie.com is where you can find everything, including all my social medias. But it's most of my social medias are Scott Hamilton Kennedy or Scott Ham Kennedy. And right now we are streaming on PBS on pbs.org and on the PBS app. Look out for it and request it from your local PBS station. So we're adding stations all the time, and please reach out to your station and ask them to play it. And then we've been doing private screenings for a long time. So if your company or organization wants to do a private screening, please reach out to us through shotinthearmmovie.com. And it's been an absolute honor to see the way the film has been embraced across the board, but especially in the public health and science communities that they've really seen it as like wind in their sails to say, it was hard. This was really difficult. It didn't go perfectly, but it was worth it. Science is worth it. Decency is worth it. Vaccines are worth it. And it's been an honor to see how it's re-inspired people. That we've seen a lot of people quit the public health industry, and it's been an honor to try and keep them there.
Very good. Well, go check out the movie. Follow Scott. Follow us as well. We are on Twitter or X. I forget what we're calling it. It changes from week to week. It's at Dr. Eliza MD. I'm at Cam J English. Come to our spaces every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. We talk about vaccines, any science topic. If you want to talk about rebuilding public trust in science, that's what we do. Scott, you got to join us at some point. I think you actually have on one. I think you got to come back.
I'm in.
Yeah. So come back and go ahead. Didn't want to cut you off, please.
Oh no, I said I'm in the next whenever my schedule allows. I love what you guys are.
Okay. Very good. I'm flattered to get that endorsement. Thank you as always for joining us, everyone, and we will